The whole constitution of human society exists for the express end, I say, of teaching the two truths by which man lives: love to God and love to man. I will say nothing more of the mysteries of the parental relation, because they belong to the teaching of the former truth, than that we come into the world as we do, to look up to the love over us and see in it a symbol, poor and weak, yet the best we can have or receive of the divine love. Footnote. It might be expressed after a deeper and truer fashion by saying that, God making human affairs after his own thoughts, they are therefore such as to be the best teachers of love to him and love to our neighbor. This is an immeasurably nobler and truer manner of regarding them than as a scheme or plan invented by the divine intellect. Footnote closed. And thousands more would find it easy to love God if they had not such miserable types of him in the self-seeking, impulse-driven, purposeless, faithless beings who are all they have for father and mother, and to whom their children are no dearer than her litter is to the unthinking dam. What I want to speak of now, with regard to the second great commandment, is the relation of brotherhood and sisterhood. Why does my brother come of the same father and mother? Why do I behold the helplessness and confidence of his infancy? Why is the infant laid on the knee of the child? Why do we grow up with the same nurture? Why do we behold the wonder of the sunset and the mystery of the growing moon together? Why do we share one bed, join in the same games, and attempt the same exploits? Why do we quarrel, vow revenge and silence and endless enmity, and, unable to resist the brotherhood within us, wind arm in arm and forget all within the hour? Is it not that love may grow lord of all between him and me? Is it not that I may feel towards him what there are no words or forms of words to express? A love, namely, in which the divine self rushes forth in utter self-forgetfulness to live in the contemplation of the brother. A love that is stronger than death, glad and proud and satisfied. But if love stopped there, what will be the result? Ruin to itself, loss of the brotherhood. He who loves not his brother for deeper reasons than those of a common parentage will cease to love him at all. The love that enlarges not its borders, that is not ever spreading and including and deepening, will contract, shrivel, decay, die. I have had the sons of my mother, that I may learn the universal brotherhood. For there is a bond between me and the most wretched liar that ever died for the murder he would not even confess, closer infinitely than that which springs only from having one father and mother. That we are the sons and the daughters of God, born from his heart, the outcoming offspring of his love, is a bond closer than all other bonds in one. No man ever loved his own child aright, who did not love him for his humanity, for his divinity, to the utter forgetting of his origin from himself. The son of my mother is indeed my brother by this greater and closer bond as well. But if I recognize that bond between him and me at all, I recognize it for my race. True, and thank God, the greater excludes not the less. It makes all the weaker bonds stronger and truer, nor forbids that where all are brothers, some should be those of our bosom. Still, my brother according to the flesh is my first neighbor, that we may be very nigh to each other, whether we will or no, while our hearts are still tender, and so may learn brotherhood. For our love to each other is but the throbbing of the heart of the great brotherhood, and could come only from the eternal Father, not from our parents. Then my second neighbor appears. And who is he? Whom I come in contact with soever. He with whom I have any transactions, any human dealings whatever. Not the man only with whom I dine, not the friend only with whom I share my thoughts, not the man only whom my compassion would lift from some slough, but the man who makes my clothes, the man who prints my books, the man who drives me in his cab, the man who begs from me in the street, to whom it may be for brotherhood's sake I must not give, yea, even the man who condescends to me. With all and each there is a chance of doing the part of a neighbor, if in no other way, yet by speaking truly, acting justly, and thinking kindly. Even these deeds will help to that love which is born of righteousness. All true action clears the springs of right feeling and lets their waters rise and flow. A man must not choose his neighbor. He must take the neighbor that God sends him. In him, whoever he be, lies hidden or revealed a beautiful brother. The neighbor is just the man who is next to you at the moment, the man with whom any business has brought you in contact. Thus will love spread and spread in wider and stronger pulses till the whole human race will be to the man sacredly lovely. Drink debased, vice defeatured, pride puffed, wealth bollen, vanity smeared, they will yet be brothers, yet be sisters, yet be God-born neighbors. Any rough-hewn semblance of humanity will at length be enough to move the man to reverence and affection. It is harder for some to learn thus than others. There are whose first impulse is ever to repel and not to receive. But learn they may, and learn they must. Even these may learn in this grace, until a countenance unknown will awaken them a yearning of affection rising to pain, because there is for it no expression, and they can only give the man to God, and be still. And now will come in all the arguments out of which the man tried in vain before to build a stair up to the sunny heights of love. Ah, brother, thou hast a soul like mine, he will say. Out of thine eyes thou lookest, and sights and sounds and odors visit thy soul as mine, with wonder and tender comforting. Thou too lovest the faces of thy neighbors. Thou art oppressed with thy sorrows, uplifted with thy joys. Perhaps thou knowest not so well as I that a region of gladness surrounds all thy grief, of light all thy darkness, of peace all thy tumult. O my brother, I will love thee. I cannot come very near thee. I will love thee the more. It may be thou dost not love thy neighbor. It may be thou thinkest only how to get from him, how to gain by him. How lonely then must thou be, how shut up in thy poverty-stricken room, with the bare walls of thy selfishness and the hard couch of thy unsatisfaction. I will love thee the more. Thou shalt not be alone with thyself. Thou art not me. Thou art another life, a second self. Therefore I can, may, and will love thee. When once to a man the human face is the human face divine, and the hand of his neighbor is the hand of a brother, then will he understand what St. Paul meant when he said, I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren. But he will no longer understand those who, so far from feeling the love of their neighbor an essential of their being, expect to be set free from its law in the world to come. There, at least, for the glory of God, they may limit its expansive tendencies to the narrow circle of their heaven. On its battlements of safety they will regard hell from afar and say to each other, Hark, listen to their moans, but do not weep, for they are our neighbors no more. St. Paul would be wretched before the throne of God if he thought there was one man beyond the pale of his mercy, and that as much for God's glory as for the man's sake. And what shall we say of the man Christ Jesus? Who that loves his brother would not, upheld by the love of Christ, and with a dim hope that in the far-off time there might be some help for him, arise from the company of the blessed and walk down into the dismal regions of despair, to sit with the last, the only unredeemed, the Judas of his race, and be himself more blessed in the pains of hell than in the glories of heaven? Who in the midst of the golden harps and the white wings, knowing that one of his kind, one miserable brother in the old world time, when men were taught to love their neighbor as themselves, was howling unheeded far below in the vaults of the creation, who, I say, would not feel that he must arise? that he had no choice, that, awful as it was, he must gird his loins and go down into the smoke and the darkness and the fire, traveling the weary and fearful road into the far country to find his brother, who, I mean, that had the mind of Christ, that had the love of the Father. But it is a wild question. God is and shall be all in all. Father of our brothers and sisters, thou wilt not be less glorious than we, taught of Christ, are able to think thee. When thou goest into the wilderness to seek, thou wilt not come home until thou hast found. It is because we hope not for them in thee, not knowing thy love, that we are so hard and so heartless to the brothers and sisters whom thou hast given us. One word more. This love of our neighbor is the only door out of the dungeon of self, where we mope and mow, striking sparks and rubbing phosphorescence out of the walls and blowing our own breath into our own nostrils, instead of issuing to the fair sunlight of God, the sweet winds of the universe. The man thinks his consciousness is himself, whereas his life consisteth in the inbreathing of God and the consciousness of the universe of truth. To have himself, to know himself, to enjoy himself, he calls life. Whereas, if he would forget himself, tenfold would be his life in God and his neighbors. The region of man's life is a spiritual region. God, his friends, his neighbors, his brothers all, is the wide world in which alone his spirit can find room. Himself is his dungeon. If he feels it not now, he will yet feel it one day. Feel it as a living soul would feel being prisoned in a dead body, wrapped in sevenfold cerements, and buried in a stone-ribbed vault within the last ripple of the sound of the chanting people in the church above. His life is not in knowing that he lives, but in loving all forms of life. He is made for the all, for God, who is the all, is his life. And the essential joy of his life lies abroad in the liberty of the all. His delights, like those of the ideal wisdom, are with the sons of men. His health is in the body of which the Son of Man is the head. The whole region of life is open to him, nay, he must live in it or perish. Nor thus shall a man lose the consciousness of well-being. Far deeper and more complete, God and his neighbor will flash it back upon him, pure as life. No more will he agonize with sick assay to generate it in the light of his own decadence, for he shall know the glory of his own being in the light of God and of his brother. But he may have begun to love his neighbor, with the hope of ere long loving him as himself, and, notwithstanding, start back affrighted at yet another word of our Lord, seeming to be another law yet harder than the first, although in truth it is not another, for without obedience to it the former cannot be attained unto. He has not yet learned to love his neighbor as himself, whose heart sinks within him at the word, I say unto you, love your enemies.